is Drupal 10, what's new and what's next. So I'm going to talk about some things that we've shipped in the recent Drupal minor releases. Those are things that you can already use if you are on the latest version of Drupal 10. I'm also going to be talking about some things that are coming next, which might give you an idea on what you could work on with us if you feel inspired, or just, in general, get a sense of where Drupal is heading. My name is Lauri Eskola, and in Drupal.org and in the internet, you can find me with my nickname, Lauri. I see many familiar faces. Maybe there are small folks who I've not met in person before, but met in the internet. Good to see you in person. I work for the Drupal acceleration team of Acquia, also referred as DAT. DAT's mission is to add momentum, planning, and organization to Drupal core. And we ensure that Drupal has a future by thinking 2 to 5 years ahead. So that's our mission statement, just to give an idea on what our team does. I'm also a Drupal core product manager. Many folks during the event have reached out to me because I recently moved from a Drupal core framework manager into a product manager role. And they've asked, what does it mean to be a product manager? And I had to think about that a little bit. What is like a good one-sentence answer for that? And I came up with that product managers represent the needs of the end users. They evaluate market trends and the competition and use this information to provide guidance on what features to build. So I'm moving more. That means that my role is evolving from being an architect or technical leader to a more of one who thinks about the product or what kinds of features to build. So before we delve into the details of what kinds of things are coming in the releases or have already been shipped, I want to zoom out and go back to a presentation that Dries gave in DrupalCon Portland 2022. And there he presented that Drupal's vision is to be the tool of choice for ambitious site builders. So that was a little bit of a change from what we had been building for before. And we've been doing a lot of thinking around who is this ambitious site builder audience. The ambitious, I think, is the important part there because it kind of defines what kind of a site builder we're thinking about. We are thinking about those who kind of, they might be building a bit more ambitious websites than just someone who is a site builder. And we think that the site builder might be someone who chooses Wix or Squarespace as their tool of choice. An ambitious site builder is something that needs a little bit more advanced options from their CMS. But ambitious site builder is not to be confused with the developer either, because of ambitious site builder might not always identify as a developer. There's a lot of overlap with those roles, but we think that it's still kind of a different kind of personality. It could be a different kind of role. It could be a project manager or someone who is otherwise just interested about technology. We believe that they can write some custom code, maybe some form alters or simple things like changing templates or adding CSS, but it's not necessarily the tool of choice for how they approach building things with Drupal. They would rather pick a module to install when something like that is available, meaning that they work mostly through the UI. We also think that they can use command line on a basic level. You can't really even install Drupal without a command line. So that's kind of a basic requirement for someone to use Drupal right now. And we are not necessarily planning to change that. We still think that persona uses a command line. It's just that they might be a bit scared when they're doing that. And for that reason, it makes sense that we are taking steps to reduce the complexity of using Drupal by reducing the steps that you have to take in command line. So earlier this year, we've done a whole bunch of research. We've interviewed users, and we've done competitive analysis to understand what do our users need. We've processed this within the committer team to identify patterns from our findings and to conclude what ambitious site builders expect in our mind from Drupal. So what we've come up with is these 3 bullet points. These summarize on a high level what we think ambitious site builders expect. They expect to have easy-to-use tools that guide them on the right path emphasis on that we have to be guiding them on the right path. They shouldn't have 10 different options that are equally presented to them. We should provide some guidance to what we believe is right for them. We need to provide them with tools that enable them to provide an enjoyable experience for their editors. We identify that many site builders work with people who are editors. They're not necessarily adding the content themselves. We also recognize that editors are not going to be doing the site building themselves. They are not going to be configuring the editor or creating the content types themselves. Those are two different roles. And we identify that there's a clear connection between them, that we need to provide the site builders with the tools that they need to provide that enjoyable experience for the editors. We also recognize that site builders require or expect to have an inexpensive and easy way to maintain their digital experiences securely over time. And this is then moving to the next step. What we have decided that what we have figured that we should focus as next to address challenges within these challenges. So let's go and talk about the first one, which is to reduce the time it takes for site builders to become proficient with Drupal. So the challenge that we've identified is that many ambitious site builders find Drupal hard to work with. I don't know, does anyone agree with that? Has anyone ever had a hard time working with Drupal? Few hands are up. Well, I guess everyone else finds Drupal easy. All right. The challenge here is kind of that Drupal expects site builders to customize and assemble Drupal on their own. When you take standard, it's like when you install Drupal with the core provided standard install profile, it's pretty far away from what you end up with. There's quite a few modules that you're expected to install and configure from there. And there are some distributions out there, but it's not necessarily the platform that a lot of users are choosing when they start. Many users are still starting from standard. And that is something that we are hearing a lot of pain about. Also, we are hearing a lot that the UI can be a bit clunky time to time. There might be some bugs there, and there might be just some things that are not optimized for the user. And here are some things that we've done to try to improve this experience. So the first thing that we've done actually shipped in Drupal 10. So if you are still in Drupal 10, this is a feature that you can utilize. And it is a feature in views. So it's the Views Responsive Grids plugin. It allows you to configure the view in a grid layout that automatically scales when the browser size changes. And this is a massive improvement over what we had previously, where you had to use maybe the less opinionated plugins for rendering the views display, and then use CSS to customize it. And this is how it looks like when you've configured it. This is all without custom code related to the layout of the view. Everything is configured through the UI. I probably would have spent at least half a day on the custom code for something like this on every site that I built. That's a huge improvement over what we have right now, and huge time saver. And if you don't know how Drupal works, it's probably going to take you more than half a day to make something like this work. Another feature or improvement we've added, this one is in 10.1, is customizable block content permissions. So block content is an entity type which is used for adding custom blocks on your site. Those are something that is often edited by the editors, but previously the permissions were bundled together with this administer blocks permission, which didn't make sense because it gave the editor all rights to do all sorts of things through the UI. This definitely did not guide the site builder or the editor towards the right direction because of, if you give this permission, the editor can do all sorts of things through the block UI. Now, with this new permissions, you can configure it so that the editor can only, for example, edit blocks, so that you have pre-configured blocks on your site and you give your editors permissions to edit the content of those. Next feature is SDC. And a lot of you might be wondering, how is this helping site builders? Because isn't this a front-end focused feature? How many of you have heard about single directory components already? Basically everyone in the room. So I'm not going to give you an overview of what single directory components does. What I'm going to tell is how it helps the site builders. So single directory components provides you the components API in core. What it does, it provides a starting point for contrib modules to start building upon. There's a common starting point for all of contrib that they can leverage as the API. There's things like SDC display, which allows you to configure which components you want to display on your entity managed display UI. Or there's modules like UI patterns that enable all sorts of things through Drupal's UI. To map components to the actual site. So this enables different ecosystems to collaborate with each other. Less silos, less compatibility issues, just more modules that you can choose from because everything is using a common platform under the hood. All right, next improvement might be a surprising one. All right, so in 2018, 5 years ago, I was buying wireless iPhone charger online. I had read reviews that this charger is like, this is a good one. So I wanted to get the very specific one. It was not available in Amazon, so I had to go to the e-commerce site of that wireless charger. And I was trying to buy it by, clicking the add to cart button. But when I clicked the button, there was like a trouble, but nothing happened. And that was not great because I was like super confused. Am I doing something wrong? Am I just, stupid? I can't figure out how to use this. And I'm a developer, so I went to the browser console, and guess what I see there? I see a Drupal Ajax error in the console. And I'm like, this is not great. This is probably not the user experience we should be giving out of the box. And I filed an issue in the Drupal issue queue to fix this. So this is what happens right now with 10.0 if you have an Ajax error. You probably saw that nothing happened. Now, with 10.1, you get an error message. And this would have been so helpful in 2018 when I was trying to buy that wireless charger, because at least I wouldn't have the frustration on myself. Can I just not use this system? I would have known with this error message, it would not have helped me buy the wireless charger, right? I still couldn't figure out how to buy it. But at least I wouldn't have been frustrated about it because I knew that there was something wrong about the system. So we conducted a usability study earlier this year around Field UI because we wanted to make some improvements to the content modeling experience of Drupal because that is one of the key functionalities about Drupal. It's something that we've put a lot of effort into. So we wanted to provide a better user experience so that more users can leverage the power of these features. We discovered several issues with it. And the first sort of set of issues we discovered related to the reuse field experience. So right now, when you're reusing a field, we basically just tell you the machine name of that field and the type of the field. And that, we figured out, doesn't really necessarily explain you what does it mean to reuse that field. So many users didn't understand the consequences of reusing the fields. The users who did understand the consequences of the reusing fields didn't understand what they're getting into with a specific field because you can't see through the UI. What does it mean? What are the settings on that field? And also, when you reuse the field, the settings from the previous field were not copied over to the new one. It started from the default settings of that field. This is particularly confusing for something like media, where the media library widget is configured to be used by default instead of something like the tag style autocomplete. And many users were pretty confused. Why is there this autocomplete? Like, where's my media library? Because they've never seen that. So what we've done is we've created a new UI for reusing fields. You can now filter your fields because you can have quite a few fields on a production level site. And now when you look at the fields, you can see the field storage settings. So those are the properties that are shared between the fields. And now once you've reused the field, your settings and field widget settings have been copied over from another instance of that field, meaning that if you have media library configured on that field, it is enabled by default when you reuse the field. We've also worked on improvements to the field creation experience, and this is shipping in 10.2. So that page, which has now one select field, looks like this. The contrast on the projector is not a bit off. There's some more colors in there, so maybe if you want to get the full experience, you can test it with the latest version of Drupal 10 from the head, but this is how it looks like. And we did multiple rounds of interviews to come up with this. This is probably like 4 rounds of user interviews that we did, and this is then the end result of that. So this was a lot of work, a very challenging piece of UIs to work with. And finally, we found something that users actually said is better than the previous one. Because the first one, when we tested it, everyone was super confused and said that they are overwhelmed by what they're seeing and not very happy about it. And it's very rewarding then to finally see something that actually people enjoy using. So there's additional fields that are hidden behind the groups. There's additional description text that help you understand what is the difference between decimal and float. I don't know. Many users didn't know on top of their head what is the difference between decimals and floats, or maybe they know on a high level what is the difference, but what are the consequences of that? And now all of that is available as a description text in the UI. During that same set of usability studies, we identified many additional issues that were not related to the field UI. They were related to navigation patterns, they were related to layout builder, and so on. And that's how we decided that we probably should do something about the navigation, because that was a big pain point that we realized that we have. We've also heard that the current navigation appears a bit outdated. So we are also doing some UI design updates in here. Probably the reason why the navigation was so painful is because we didn't have the admin toolbar module enabled there. How many of you are running Drupal without admin toolbar? One person is claiming that they're running their site without admin toolbar. That is quite an achievement. So that's why we decided, okay, we probably should improve the default experience to be something that, users can be delighted of. And that's how we've formed this group of people. We are working on a new toolbar, and you can see the designs or prototypes that we're working on right now. This is still very early prototypes that we are building. We haven't tested this with any users, so it might not look like anything like this in the end. I just wanted to show some visual hints on how it could potentially be in the end. This work is led by Christina, who is actually in here as well. And that's made possible by Lullabot. She's been sponsored for 6 months, which is great. So thanks, Lullabot, as well. And she's going to be talking about this in more detail tomorrow at 11. So if you want to know more about admin navigation improvements, go there. Some other things that are ongoing. Project Browser is being worked on to make it easier for site builders to find and install modules. We understand that installing contributed modules is a key part of maintaining your sites, and there's some pain around, in particular, around discovering modules. Not necessarily the installation part is a pain point, but even bigger pain point is the actual finding of those modules. And we've come up with the solution to bring Project Browser in Drupal so that we can kind of address both of those problems. We can improve the discovery, but we can also provide some delightful improvements for the installations, that we can remove a step from command line. So depending sort of what is your comfort level of using command line, you might be excited about different parts of this initiative. This is also kind of we are changing our mindset a little bit about our contrib. I'm going to talk about that later. But in general, we are kind of trying to be more open towards contrib. We are trying to promote contrib more in Drupal, even more than what we are doing right now. And the reason for that is because we want to enable innovation in the contrib ecosystem, which is something that Gabor talked about earlier today. Something else that is really exciting related to this is the recipes initiative. So when site builders start building sites, right now they most of the time use standard as their starting point. That's just based on Drupal.org data. And that is not a great experience because you have to configure everything manually. But also we can't really solve that with the distributions because that would lead into additional issues with the continued maintenance of those distributions because they have to keep maintaining that experience for all of the sites that are depending on the distribution. So that's why we are working on recipes that allows us to provide that distribution-like experience without any of those maintenance challenges that we have with distributions. All right, let's move on to the editorial experience improvements and how we are empowering site builders to deliver that. So basically the challenge is that site builders are in a landscape where content editors are used to using easy to use tools that provides them with the right amount of flexibility. And now the emphasis on the right amount of flexibility. You need some flexibility. You probably need more flexibility than what you have on something like Wix or Squarespace or WordPress, but then you can't have too much flexibility because if you give too much flexibility, then you overwhelm the users. Like if you want the unlimited amount of flexibility, why would you not just write it in code? So you kind of have to balance between those two different needs. And it's really hard right now for site builders to set Drupal in a way that meets those needs and makes the editors actually feel satisfied with the experience. So some improvements that we've shipped in the recent releases is we've added a CKEditor 5 plugin called Auto Format. This allows using shortcuts for formatting your syntax or your text in CKEditor. So things like if you use the asterisks, converts into a bulleted list, which is something that a lot of editors expect from tools like Word or Google Docs. So here's a little demo on how that looks like. You can see that the numbers are being converted automatically into an ordered list. And on top of that, we created some bold text and emphasis on the word Drupal. Yeah, so that's a nice little improvement for our editors. Some additional things that we are updating for editors is we have a new design for bulk operations, and this is actually coming from pretty early days of Claro. We received during the Claro development process a lot of feedback from sites that certain pages, like the content listing, have issues where the main area of the content moves below fold on their laptop. And I worked with a designer who was contracting for Acquia at the time to kind of explore some ideas on how we could improve that. Because of the paddings or the margins that we were using in Claro, they were not necessarily out of order in terms of like what is expected for accessibility or what other systems are doing. So we couldn't really necessarily reduce the margins or the paddings. So we had to do something else if we wanted to improve that situation. And here's just kind of the first proof of concept that we came up with in terms of just designing UIs that take less space and only show when they are helpful for the context. So you can see that there's the bulk operations on the bottom of the page. It only shows when you have something selected. And when you are not doing anything, when you don't have any actions selected, you don't see that, and it's not consuming any space from top of the page. We've also shipped many performance improvements in Drupal 10.1. Ajax requests can now use GET requests, which allows caching those. This is already enabled in Ajax. Ajax-enabled views. And we've also added a new field formatter to generate time ago type of information on the client side so that you don't have to regenerate that page every time, that time ago. So for example, 5 minutes ago, if you want to show that how many minutes ago or how many hours ago node was created, previously that would be rendered on the back end, and you would have to gear your cache. You would have to bust your cache every time you wanted that to update. Now it's generated on the front end. We just give the front end the timestamp, and the front end generates this automatically on the fly without having to bust the caches. And probably the biggest improvement is the multiple improvements we've made to CSS and JavaScript aggregation. And this is probably something that is worth also testing on your site when you are upgrading to 10.1, because if there's been it's some behavior that is changing as a result of this, because we are handling the aggregated bundles now slightly differently than before. Now looking into the future stuff of what we are thinking to improve the editorial experience. So we are looking into making improvements to the layout builder that would make creating and editing pages easier. So we are making some incremental improvements to layout builder, to the current experience, but we are also looking into what should we do in the long term. And we've heard that many editors expect more like an editorial-like experience, like if they were editing in Google Docs or Microsoft Word, like Control-Z, copy and paste, things like that. And this is why we are doing discovery on a modernized page building experience that combines the strengths of structured content and modern page building tools like Google Docs-like experience. Here's just kind of a mock-up of what that could potentially look like. We have a title as a structured content, and we have an image field. So you must always have an image on this content. But then after that, you have just like a layout builder-like experience where you can create any kind of content on this page. This is something we're doing discovery on. So if you have any ideas or thoughts on this, feel free to come reach out to me or Gabor, and we are happy to discuss about this. Also, this is an area where there's a lot of opportunity to also help for those who are not as technical, because we are just doing the discovery at the moment on this. And then the third track, which we are promoting here, is the reducing the cost of keeping Drupal applications secure. So the challenge is that keeping Drupal 9 or Drupal 10 sites up to date is pretty labor intensive. And there's various reasons why that is so, but right now it is manual work, and there's multiple steps that are required from that. Also, it's not just that it's a lot of work, but it's something that requires quite specialized expertise sometimes. Like, let's say if you have some intricate patches in your Composer JSON, you probably need your senior developer looking into your updates when you have a conflict on those patches. It's not necessarily something you want your new team member working on. Also, there's sometimes, just the need to assess if there's regressions or not, and whether a security release is applicable to your site, whether you need to make an emergency update on your site out of office hours. So we've made some improvements on the area of just, in general, maintaining your sites. We've fixed a lot of bugs to reduce the number of patches that people need to apply on their sites. This is something that we've done in Drupal core. We have the Bug Smash initiative and the Needs Review Queue initiative that have done enormous amount of work on this area and made a lot of progress in the last year or so, especially in the 10.1. It's kind of the pinnacle of that. There's been a lot of progress on this field. And I've had many people kind of anecdotally come tell me that there's so many patches that I can remove now from my composer JSON now that 10.1 is out. But if we just look at the most followed issues for Drupal core, you can see that there's multiple issues that are over 10 years old that we've just closed in 10.1. We are going to continue these efforts. The bug smash initiative is still ongoing. The needs review queue initiative is ongoing. So if you're interested in smashing more bugs like this, definitely still an opportunity to join the efforts. Then we also have the automated updates initiative. So we have two challenges that we kind of have to address with automated, or we are trying to address with automated updates. So we have first just the automatic updating of modules and Drupal core and all dependencies, so that you don't have to do manual work to get those done. And then the second part is to make sure that the contributed module updates that you're getting are stable. And this is kind of a big challenge that we have to work on, because we have this vision also that we want to have a composable core, which means that more and more things are going to move out of core, which means that there's going to be probably more dependencies that you depend on. And to not create more work for the people who maintain sites, we need those updates to be as stable as possible. So we want to reduce the cost of depending on contributed modules so that the overall cost of ownership doesn't increase when we move modules out from core into contributed modules. We also need to make sure that we have the key contributed modules that people depend on, that they are actively maintained, so that there's a release on a timely manner whenever there's a new major release, or that this has received the security support. That's also something we have to take care of. There's also issues where people have to apply patches on unmaintained modules because to meet the basic requirements of the module, you need to apply patches. So we are trying to take some action where we can maybe facilitate the process where more and more contrib becomes more stable, better maintained. It's not something that we can change in core per se. And this is kind of maybe a little bit of change in the mindset where we're not, the Drupal core team or Drupal core product managers at least, are not going to be looking at just Drupal core, but we want to look at the whole ecosystem more holistically and then see what needs to be done. It's not that we're going to take over the contributed modules, it's just that how can we support your module the best? Another initiative, which is not necessarily going to result in a lot of changes in the Drupal core code base, but we have acknowledged it as a challenge, which is that Drupal 7 EOL is coming in 2025, the beginning of 2025. Finally, there's a hard timeline for people to work towards. There's no more extensions. That's what's been said. But we also have almost 400,000 sites still on Drupal 7, which is, it's a significant amount. And what we have to do is to make sure that we do everything that we can to make sure that the folks who are still on Drupal 7 have a smooth upgrade path away from Drupal 7. Not necessarily something we can do in Drupal core, but it's something that we certainly want to support and facilitate from the core process. If there's any APIs that we need to provide to make this smoother, that's certainly something that we would be open to looking into. All right, so for Drupal 10.1.0 and 9.5.0, I included all of the issues that have been closed for these branches because if there's not a good number that I can give for a single release, because we backport issues in the previous releases, but kind of in the last year or so, we've fixed around 1,800 issues, which is a big number. I talked about less than 20 of those. So this is just a small subset of what we shipped in 10.1.0 and these other releases. So there's a lot to be excited, even if there wasn't anything that helped you in this presentation. So I would like to remind that Drupal is all of us. We can make the next release as good as the current release. Let's add some exciting things in the 10.2.0. If you're interested in some of these things, come talk to us and we can help you get started on contributing to these things. if you're interested about the roadmap, more details about this can be found from the Drupal core blog. There's a link in here, but you can also get there from Drupal.org if you just go to the Drupal.org/blog, and then you select from there the strategic initiatives. And that is my presentation. I think we have some time for questions.
Thank you for this great overview. I wasn't really familiar with auto formats, but what's the difference between that and Markdown, which is basically in a lot of products these days that are also reaching a non-developer audience?
So the auto format uses Markdown format as the shortcut of it. It's just that it converts it into HTML as you write. So if you, for example, use the asterisks around a word, it would convert it into bold. It would convert that into HTML. So it is Markdown-like experience of typing, but it's not exactly Markdown that you use there. They've created their own syntax.
Okay.
But it's I would say it's pretty much because there's like different flavors of that. If you look at different products, like if you look at Apple Notes, for example, it has its own flavor. If you look at Google Docs, it has its own flavor. So yeah, CK Editor has its own flavor.
Yeah, I'm aware. I'll save that discussion for another.
Yes.
So Lauri, thanks for the presentation up to now. When you say you want to do a better and easier editor experience, from what I usually see on distributions that cater to editors, they usually use paragraphs. So they've basically split off into paragraph land with its many problems in terms of database and whatever. Any plans on eventually getting some kind of paragraph type functionality into core, which I think would help the editors a lot?
Yeah, I think the end user outcome that we are hoping is similar to paragraphs. This is if we would, the user experience that we are visioning is maybe a little bit different. But I think sort of the goals that paragraphs has are definitely shared with what we are doing.
Yeah, so for now, what I see, okay, there's layout builder, of course, but for now, when you out of the box, you have basically a body and CK editor to do what you just showed, which is amazing. But I see people want to be, we want to have a paragraph that's just text or just an image, and we want them to basically to be able to slide those up and down, and that's something that CK editor simply will never allow us to do.
Yep. Yeah, so we basically want to achieve the same outcomes as paragraphs with a better UI or improved UX.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
So one of the things I see if we're talking about this editor experience is that we're adding more complex UI and UX interactions within Drupal, which seems a little bit maybe antithetical to the API first initiatives that we've been pushing previously. Do you think we should maybe also decouple more of the editor experience and provide APIs and backends to do that rather than put these very complex editor experience back into Drupal?
So we do have the Pittsburgh project for Layout Builder React. So I know that the developer community is already exploring ideas on how we could use different technologies to build some of these UIs. I personally want to remain agnostic to any sort of technology. I'm personally working on trying to clarify what is the vision of the editing experience, and then I want to work with the developer community to define what is the best way for us to achieve that, whether it is with the current architecture of PHP, Ajax kind of architecture, or if we should use a decoupled architecture for that. But I think we want to kind of work it for, so that we have first a clear idea. This is what we want to build, and then we choose what is the best, what is the easiest way for us to get there.
Okay, thank you.
Currently, if you want to get something into core, a lot of thought and consideration goes into it. So it's like really well guarded, so to speak. You talked about getting things out of core into contrib. The thing with contrib is that it usually moves faster, but it also breaks faster because of that. If you strip down core, then you end up with the risk that, very popular pieces that you pulled out of core may go unmaintained or may break because they have higher velocity. Yep. Is that something that you have in mind already?
I don't think we have a solution in mind for that yet, but it is one of the things that we are looking into. Like, we want to provide as good of an experience of maintaining your size as it is right now. So moving things outside of core should not compromise that. So we do want to address that one way or another. And it's another topic which I'm very interested to hear if you have any thoughts on that.
This was in my talk that we try to, and also, you also mentioned it, that we try to raise the quality of contrib by project browser automatic updates and recipes, and they should focus more of the efforts in terms of certain things that are common. So I think that should help with raising that quality and making sure that it's more well maintained, because more eyes will be looking at the same things instead of looking at different things.
Yep.
But the reason I put up my hand was that I have a question for you. So we
Can
have
I add to the previous point? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
So there's also additional ideas on top of these where we have like a working group that would help with the contributed module maintenance. And there's probably like 4 or 5 different ideas on how we could approach that. And there's a link in this page to an issue which groups a lot of that together. But go ahead, Gabor.
So I think we have a history of wanting to do something and then figuring it out as developers and then putting it into core. And now you've showed us this and briefly mentioned that you did user testing, and I would be interested if you could tell us a bit more about how you arrived at what you worked on in terms of the field UI, for example, and why you worked on that and how you user tested it and how you made it work for the user tests and that kind of stuff, because I think it's more of a new approach to core development as some of the other things.
Yep, I can talk about that. So earlier this year, we decided that we want to work on Field UI, and we kind of that was something that we kind of just came up with because Field UI is something that we hear is important to a lot of people, but we didn't necessarily do a whole lot of research on that. But we didn't know how could we improve the Field UI. We had some ideas on what we could do, but there was a very low confidence in those ideas. And what we did was we collaborated with the Acquia UX team to set up a set of usability interviews. So we interviewed 6 users, and we formulated scripts specific to Field UI to discover what kind of challenges do these users face. We focused on 2 specific groups. So we had a group of people which was experienced Drupal users, mostly Drupal users with 10+ years of experience. And then we have had half of the participants be new Drupal users, so users with little to no experience of using Drupal. And then we kind of looked at what kinds of themes and patterns we see in these 2 different roles. What can we do to help those roles? And what was surprising was that the things that we discovered were quite different from what we thought that the problems were. There was definitely some connections in there, but it was quite different from what we anticipated. And what we did with those results was that we created some prototypes. So we worked around 2 weeks to create designs and prototypes for something that we believed would help with some of those challenges. And then, as I said, the experience was that maybe on the first time that we tested those improvements, they were not as welcomed as we were hoping for. So we iterated based on the feedback that we received in those interviews, because the challenges were different from what we had on the first time. So we then improved on those challenges. And we had 6 users on each round. And based on that, we made gradual improvements to the designs. And then on the 4th round of interviews, we finally had everyone say that, cool, this is actually, we believe this is better than what we had previously. And we still discovered, even at that point, some minor challenges, but it was very small compared to what we had on the first time. So basically what we did was that we confirmed that in the beginning that the problems that we are working on are real problems that users are facing as they use the system. And then the follow-up interviews that we ran were to confirm that we are actually addressing those problems. What was interesting, like one of the biggest challenges, or what we thought is the biggest challenge to running these was finding users. Like we didn't know who should we talk to because of like, we had never done anything like that. And then once we actually started seeking out for people, we contacted like agency leaders, people who have connections, people who train Drupal, new Drupal people, and so on. And turns out that hiring was really easy. And based on my discussions with Acquia UX, like they said that it was probably easier than what they've ever experienced on their UX research. So that's, I guess, the power of the Drupal community. There's a lot of people who are interested in helping. Any additional questions? Looks like we don't have any more questions, so thank you, everyone.